Okay, so I want to do this video in case you didn't get a chance to see the demos, or you were absent that day, or for whatever reason you just didn't get to see these demos. I think these demos do a really good job of explaining our three modes of heat transfer. Now you might ask, why all of a sudden are we talking about heat transfer? We just got done talking about evolution. Well, we're going towards geology, and one of the ways that we get the bridge between evolution and geology, because there is a bridge that connects them, we have to start to talk about plate tectonics. And one of the things that drives plate tectonics is these modes of heat transfer. And so there are three modes of them, and I'll use three different demonstrations to show you those three. The first demo is a very familiar object. This is our radiometer. We have seen this a couple of times this year, but mainly when we were talking about Light Lab number 1. And with Light Lab number 1, we saw this radiometer and we took a flashlight. And with that flashlight, all we did was shine that flashlight on the radiometer, and we began to observe that the diamonds on the inside of the radiometer, or the panels on the inside of the radiometer, actually begin to spin. And you can see that right now in the video, in the demonstration. They're starting to pick up speed a little bit. You notice they spin one direction too. They spin in the direction that is the light shining on the black side of the diamond. Okay? And some of you may ask, well, why are they spinning that direction? And it's got to be through some sort of solar panel type deal. Well, it kind of is in a way, but it's more just the black side of the panel is absorbing heat from the flashlight. And so that's method number 1. We're talking about heat transfer through light. And that is what we will call radiation. Okay, so if you take a look up at the board, we have the radiometer as our example number 1, but then radiation is the form of heat transfer. And that's transfer of heat through light. You guys know that when you go outside and you stand in the sun. You've been out in the sun, and all of a sudden you can feel the sun on your skin. That is because the heat is being transferred from the sun to your skin through the form of radiation. Form number 2 that I want to talk about are these heat packs. You take these to football games when you know it's going to be 35 degrees and raining outside. When you know that it's just going to be so cold at a soccer game that you're not going to be able to keep your hands warm. You use these heat packs to stick inside your gloves or inside your shoes to be able to keep yourself warm when you know it's going to be really cold. Now these things work because there's chemicals on the inside of these pouches, and when these chemicals react, they give off a great deal of heat. And so in this case, after they give off a great deal of heat, it heats up the pack, and then the pack in turn will heat up your hand. But how does the heat get from the pack to your hand? It's going through direct touch. And so what we have is heat packs, our example, but then our form of heat transfer is what we call conduction. And conduction is the transfer of heat through touch, or through actual connection between objects. So once again, we have our connection of the hot pack to our hand, and that's transferring heat through actual touch between the two objects. Okay, now our last form of heat transfer that I'm going to put my goggles on for, and the reason I'm putting my goggles on is because we're going to deal with some really hot water. And what I want to do is I'm going to try to get up close enough to this, and hopefully our water is warm enough for you to really be able to see it. But what I want you to see is I'm going to put just a little bit of blue food coloring in it. And what you should be able to see is the blue food coloring, first of all, may actually start to spin. And you may ask, well, why is it starting to spin? Why is it kind of going in a direction like down to the bottom and then rising up, and then down to the bottom and then rising up? It's because of heat transfer. Where's the warmest water? The warmest water is down at the bottom right next to the source of heat, which is the hot plate. What do we know about warm water? It rises because it's less dense than cold water. And so since it rises, it comes up to the top and carrying with it this blue dye. And so it's bringing all the heat up to the top. When the heat comes up to the top, it cools and then falls back down on the sides. So let's see if we can actually get a little bit of a visualization here. I'm just going to drop a little bit of food coloring in. Okay, and we can see that is going, and then it almost hits like a block at the bottom. And the reason it almost hits like a block, we can kind of see some of the swirling motion going on. But the reason you can see some of those particles starting to rise, the reason it kind of got to the bottom and stopped was because it had all that warm water that was sitting there, and it was pushing back up on the food coloring that was coming down on it. And so what we see in this little demonstration is the heat transfer of convection. And we have our beaker with dye, and we have convection, and that's the heat transfer through fluids. Okay, now I don't want anybody to be confused when they hear the term fluid. Yeah, we use the example of water, but water is not the only fluid. Fluid is the air around you. It's either a liquid or a gas that convection can transfer heat through. So just to recap real quick, we had our 3 demonstrations representing our 3 modes of heat transfer. 1, radiation, or transfer of heat through light. We had that with the flashlight, with the radiometer. 2, we used the heat packs, or the hot packs, and they transferred heat through actual touch. That was conduction. And finally, our last form of heat transfer was convection, which we saw with the beaker and the dye, and we saw that there being some sort of heat transferred through a fluid. And in this case, our fluid was water, and it was actually transferring the heat because we knew that because it was picking up the dye and then setting it down. And so we know the warm water rises and the cold water falls. Okay? What you'll need to do now, after knowing this, is you're going to need to complete the conduction, convection, radiation worksheet, which gives you a couple of examples of those. And you have to tell me now which one shows conduction, which one shows convection, which one shows radiation. Good luck.